Welcome to the On the Pen, the Weekly Dose podcast, your one-stop shop for obesity medicine news with your host, man on the pen, Dave Knapp. Welcome to the Tuesday, February 18th, 2025 edition of On the Pen, the Weekly Dose podcast live. I'm your host, Dave Knapp, man on the Manjaro. That's why I'm here. You are on the pen. Wegovy, Saxenda, Victoza, Trulicity, Manjaro's outbound compound, that pen. And we talk about the news facing obesity medications every week. We're going to jump right off into the news this week with a little bit of housekeeping news, because I know that you're all waiting to hear from me on this. We got our back on Amazon. Believe it or not, a really unexpected email came this weekend from Amazon, and they informed me that they had reviewed the scores of emails that I had sent on the topic of them banning our book, and that they had elected to allow it back on the marketplace. So it was republished this weekend. glpbook.com. We lowered the price to $10 because who knows, the big tech giveth and the big tech taketh away. So we wanted to make it available for as cheap as possible. $10 gets you a copy of Decoding GLP-1, a guide for friends and family of those on the pen. You can check it out at glpbook.com. Thank you to everyone within the OTP community who helped advocate for the bringing back of this book. I have no doubt in my mind that the scores of emails and phone calls that were sent on this book, as well as the reviews that were left, made all the difference in the world. I am so thankful to each and every one of you who fought the good fight for us. And thank you for everyone who has purchased a copy of the book and left a review. I really, really thank each and every one of you. It just means the world to me. I am in much better spirits today than I was towards the end of last week. Can you tell? It definitely occupied a lot of my mental space over this past weekend. So thank you for everyone who helped advocate there. And I also want to say a special birthday shout out to Discord member and OTP community member Neo Queen. Neo Queen is celebrating year 35 today. So happy birthday, Neo. Thank you for spending it with us. And thank you for being such a wonderful part of the OTP community. Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, as you know, we sort of changed the format up a few weeks ago on the podcast. We're talking about 4 main topics each week that affect obesity medication and the patients that use them and need them and benefit from them. We're going to talk about current drugs. We're going to talk about new drugs. We're going to talk about advocacy and policy, and a little something for the investors at the end. So thank you for joining me. We're going to jump right into it today. In the world of current drugs, there's nothing that dominates this topic like the topic of compound medications, because of the uncertainty that's going on with the OFA and FDA/Eli Lilly trial. There's just a lot of questions out there about the future accessibility of compounds. So today is February 18th. This was supposed to be a major inflection point for compound tirzepatide, right? The original deadline for 503A pharmacies to stop compounding was set for today. You guys remember that? But as expected, that date has now been overridden by the guidance that we received last week from the FDA, sort of a reversal of what we had heard previously reported from the Alliance for Pharmacy Compounding. Essentially, what we learned here is that they will not be enforcing anything against compounds until there is a ruling by the judge in that trial in district court in Texas as to what they're going to do for a preliminary injunction. That ruling is expected any day now. I am thinking that we should have some sort of an answer by February 25th at the latest. If you just follow the sort of the timeline that we were given from the court as far as how long each party would have to respond to the information that the FDA was providing the Outsourcing Facilities Association, that puts us roughly right around the February 25th mark. So that is what we are really expecting to see is something by the 25th of the month. Now, this is there's going to be a lot of plugs because I continue to hammer home that onthepen.com is the number one resource for news for people who are on the pen. If you want patient-centric news, onthepen.com is where you get it. Sign up for email alerts so you never miss an update. But we put an article about this out last week if you want to get more information about it, the FDA clarification. But this basically means that compound pharmacies still have a lifeline for now, since they're waiting for the February 5th, 25th or so ruling. Some 503A pharmacies have chosen, and some may continue to choose, to stop compounding today based upon their internal legal advice or counsel, their risk assessment, but there's no immediate crackdown happening. Everything that hinges upon the preliminary injunction. If it's granted, it could block the FDA from enforcing the ban on compounding, at least until this case plays out fully, right? Which could be up to a year. If the injunction fails, then March 19th remains the next hard deadline for 503B compounders to cease their operations. And while some pharmacies may try to push past that, we hear lots of talk, and inevitably there will be questions in the comments about, well, this telehealth company or that telehealth company said they're going to continue on, and they're going to do it by custom formulations and custom dosing. So yes, they will. The question remains, what will their appetite to continue to offer those be in the face of Eli Lilly, who is more than willing and more than capable of bringing their legions and armies of attorneys to the fight and trying to get them shut down legally? We'll see how that all plays out. And we're going to continue to cover this very closely at onthepen.com. But for those who are potentially looking at branded options again, it may be another time to take another look at what your options are for branded medication. I strongly recommend that you check out Ro's insurance tracker tool, ro.co/insurance checker or checker. I believe just the word checker. But just do a Google search for Ro Insurance Checker. They'll run your insurance and they'll tell you what you do or do not qualify for. But they have a wonderful program that helps fight for prior authorizations and everything like that. We actually put out what I feel is a really helpful article this week at onthepen.com about just what that prior authorization process looks like. And you can kind of see here that at the beginning of the article, we put a video out too, but there's basically 4 tracks. If you're denied insurance, you can just kind of look at what those 4 tracks are, see which one applies to you. Hey, if you're on Medicare, you just click track 3. That takes you down to, hey, this is what it looks like to get anti-obesity medications covered if you're on Medicare. And then at the end of the article, I've actually dropped a whole bunch of links that your provider may or may not find helpful in terms of just citing different information that's available on the internet about what other comorbidities that anti-obesity medications treat. So I hope that you will check that out, and I hope that is a beneficial thing for you to use in the future as you potentially look towards branded medication options. Moving along into the idea of new drugs and new potential research, let's talk about an interesting article out there that came across my desk this week. For decades, science has thought of fat as just storage. It's just this ever-expanding reservoir of extra calories. But what if I told you that fat itself, the cells itself within the fat, hold the key to unlocking this idea of personalized obesity treatments that we have talked about here at On the Pen as being sort of the future of obesity medicine, where people get treated as individuals? That's exactly what a groundbreaking study out of Israel's Ben Gurion University is suggesting, and the implications could be massive. Check this out. This is crazy. This study, which is part of a program called the Human Cells Atlas Project, is the first to map unique subpopulations of fat cells across different types of fat tissue. By tagging RNA molecules with unique barcodes, researchers were able to identify distinct fat cell types, each playing a different role in the human body. Some regulate inflammation, some others influence blood vessel formation, and one newly discovered type exists only in the intra-abdominal fat, which is closely linked to metabolic disease. And this is where it gets super encouraging for somebody like me who carries most of my fat abdominally and really struggles with the current therapies that are on the market. The study found that the prevalence of these unique fat cells directly correlates with obesity-related complications like insulin resistance. This means that in the future, we may be able to use fat cell profiling to predict an individual's unique risk for obesity-related diseases, and more importantly, to tailor treatment accordingly. The big takeaway here is that not all fat is created equal. Right? While subcutaneous fat, the kind under your skin, tends to have anti-inflammatory properties, visceral fat, which is the kind of fat that accumulates around your organs, is actually pro-inflammatory. And this difference might explain why some people develop metabolic complications at certain weights and certain BMIs, while others do not. So it represents a huge shift in obesity treatment. Instead of like these one size fits all, here's your shot, take it weekly. It represents a future where precision medication could be used in obesity, kind of similar to tailored medicine that you see in oncology and treatment for cancer. So this is a potential big one that we're going to keep an eye on at On the Pen, because if these findings hold up, we're looking at a whole new fight against obesity at a cellular level. So stay tuned, because this is a topic that obviously you can tell gets me very excited as somebody who struggles with the current treatments that are available. Shifting over to the topic of advocacy this week, let's talk a little bit about PBMs, right? PBM reform is a big topic of conversation because advocacy around obesity medicine is so focused on accessibility to treatment, whatever they are, whether they're the future treatments that will be these individualized treatments, or they're the current treatments like Zepbound and Wegovy. It is super important to maintain accessibility, and PBMs are a huge, huge problem in the United States when it comes to inflating the cost of medication and making them harder for people to get. So I want to cover just a recent, what are they doing now for patients? Check this out. Recently, Eagan, Minnesota-based Prime Therapeutics was ordered to pay over $10 million in damages, cost of doing business for these monsters, as they found that basically the arbiter in a federal case found that the company was engaging in illegal price fixing with its competitor Express Scripts, a collusion aimed at suppressing drug reimbursement rates for patients with HIV and AIDS. Wonderful, right? The case was brought forward by the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, which argued that such practices violated federal and Minnesota antitrust laws and jeopardized patient care by reducing funds available for essential medications. Of course, from Prime Therapeutics' standpoint, they were just working to bring the cost of drugs down. Of course they were, right? The arbiter's ruling highlighted that Prime Therapeutics and Express Scripts basically collaborated to align their pharmacy reimbursement rates, effectively eliminating competition and harming pharmacies and patients nationwide. The scheme was designed to peg Prime reimbursement rates to Express Scripts rates, resulting in significant cost savings for the PBMs at the expense of pharmacies and ultimately patients. So this is just the latest in the case of the broader concerns surrounding PBMs and their influence on drug pricing. We learned that 70%, up to 70% of prescription drugs are basically paid back to PBMs as the gatekeepers of the formularies that provide us access to the medications through our insurance. It's just such a broken system. In the state of Iowa, where I live, there's actually PBM reform right now looking to basically protect patients from being able to get the medication from the pharmacy of their choosing, rather than being funneled to this giant monopoly system that is created by just a few select PBMs to use their pharmacies so that they can maximize their profits. Of course, we've covered this extensively, but it just highlights and underscores the importance of PBM reform if we're going to get anything accomplished in this broken system. I hope that we'll continue to see stuff at the state level here in Iowa, and we're seeing it in other states as well. But I hope that we're continuing to see that at the federal level as well. Now, on the topic of investors, we like to give investors a little something at the end, but you don't have to be an investor to get excited about some information that came out this week about Amylin. So Amylin has taken a lot of, in the investor community, Amylin has taken a lot of garbage lately, because the most recent information trial data that we got from Novo Nordisk's CagriSema sort of fell short of their expectations of 25% weight loss. They ended up being more around 22, 23%, closer to Tirzepatide. Essentially, the reaction was overblown, in my opinion, because what people fail to understand that don't follow this stuff closely is that the CagriSema trials do not force dose escalation throughout the trial, whereas your Surmount trials for Tirzepatide, you had to be on 2.5 for 1 month, and then you had to go to 5, and I believe Surmount did 2.5, 5, 10, and then 15. So the forced dose escalation of Tirzepatide led to greater weight loss, where now you see Novo Nordisk basically designing their trials to mimic real life a little bit more closely, where doctors are not basically required to move their patient up if they're seeing success on the current dose, right? The forced dose escalation trials are simply designed for one thing. That's to achieve the highest amount of average weight loss in the shortest amount of time. That's not the best way to judge obesity medication, because that's not how it is in the real world. And unfortunately, it leads, I believe, to treatment that maybe is not ideal for patients when a doctor just follows the clinical trial, but the clinical trial was designed to get maximum weight loss, where what we're trying to do is improve an individual's overall health. I believe what Novo Nordisk is doing is better. So I believe Amylin has sort of gotten a bad tag because of that CagriSema trial, but Amylin, what we're learning with some new science is that it actually works on a very specific part of your brain that actually impacts not only how much food you eat, but the food that you actually choose to eat. It can actually impact one's desire or lack of a desire for specific macronutrients. So in mice, when they actually injected directly into the brain this amylin analog, they found that there was a massive amount of weight loss. Essentially, it is an area of the brain called the central amygdala. It's a part of the brain that controls not only just the food that you take in, but it controls emotions and motivation. And so scientists injected this amylin directly into that part of the brain in rats, and it dramatically reduced how much they ate. And it's because it's huge, because amylin is not just suppressing appetite, it's dampening the brain's drive to overeat. So when we look at the future of anti-obesity medication, where some people want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and just say amylin is just not it. Amylin, of course, co-secreted in your pancreas with insulin. They're finding that it has a profound impact on your appetite, the foods that you eat. And if you're a diabetic like me, this poses, I think, a really extra interesting facet to it, because people with type 2 diabetes are already dysregulated in insulin, right? There's an overproduction of insulin, there's insulin resistance, and you just wonder how much that amylin is impacted by that. Amylin, the potential for amylin resistance or dysregulation in amylin. So I think for that reason, as a type 2 diabetic patient, I get particularly excited about the potential future treatments with amylin. So let's just talk a little bit about what's in the pipeline. We talk a lot about CagriSema. That's the next anti-obesity medication that will hit the market, is CagriSema from Novo Nordisk. Early 2026 is the target for CagriSema being released. Of course, they're also working on, Novo Nordisk, the next generation of CagriSema already. It's called amycretin. They're working on that in a once weekly injection and an oral. So that's exciting. And they see just astounding results. We've done some videos on that. You can look up amycretin, AMYCRETIN. You can search that on my YouTube channel or search it on onthepen.com. But we've talked about amycretin quite a bit. That's an exciting one. And Eli Lilly has their own version of this called eloralintide. And so Lilly isn't sitting amylin out. They've got their own eloralintide, their own amylin-based contender that they're looking at potentially combining with retatrutide or tirzepatide in the future. So everybody's getting in on this. Of course, a couple of weeks ago, and I would really recommend another article that you check out if you're an investor and you are curious about who's making waves in this space. I'm really excited personally about this company called Metsera. We did an article on them. They have a long-acting, basically, I believe it's a GLP-1 GIP, a long-acting, but they also have a long-acting amylin, a once-monthly injection of an amylin analog. So that to me is really, really, really exciting, because you can see other companies sort of outside of the two that we talk about and that dominate the conversation. You see companies like Metsera right on the horizon, and I'm super, super excited for what that may have to offer. My friends, that's what I have for you this week for On the Pen, the weekly dose. There are about 35% of you, depending on which video you watch, that are not subscribed. I would just simply ask that you hit the subscribe button. It is the one way that you can give back to the work that we do at onthepen.com. It's one thing that doesn't cost you anything, right? So it takes me a tremendous amount of time to put this together every week. All I ask for in return is a subscribe and a thumbs up. Thank you for doing your part. Thank you for here at On the Pen. I wouldn't, and shouldn't do it without you. Thanks for hanging out with me live on this Tuesday. Of course, this airs to the podcast, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you drop it a 5-star rating and review once you listen there. And thank you. And thank you once again to our sponsor, Ro. Ro is the sponsor of the On the Pen, the Weekly Dose podcast. You can check them out at rowbody.com. You can check them out at row.co/OTP and learn more about the Row Body program, where patients lose 15 to 20% of their body weight in a year when coupling their medications that they're prescribed through the doctors at Row. And couple that with lifestyle interventions, all the good things. Learn more about the Row Body program and thank them for being such a wonderful sponsor of On the Pen and such a wonderful advocate for the community. Again, we talked about them at the top of this and what they're offering with their insurance checker tool and all the success that so many in the OTP community are seeing getting approved for branded medications. So thank you, Row, and thank you. Have a great week. And we will catch you Thursday night for On the Pen Live, 9 p.m. Central, our 102nd episode. Can't wait to see you then.